We're here with Austin, the owner operator of Bear Claw Land Services. Excited to have you on, man. To kick things off, do you mind just telling the audience a little bit about who you are and the business that you run?
Yeah, my name is Austin Gray. As you said, I own and operate Bear Claw Land Services. We are a forestry and land clearing company out here in Colorado. We're focused on a very specific niche in fire mitigation work. So we're kind of a mix between a logging company and a tree service company. We fit a very specific customer, a little bit bigger and heavier equipment than a tree service or a traditional tree service or plant healthcare company, and then a little bit smaller operation than full scale commercial logging. And the reason why is because there are wildfires out here in the Western United States. We've had several catastrophic ones, one notable wildfire being the East Troublesome wildfire in 2020 in our area. It's basically in our backyard. If it would have been 10 miles south, it would have basically engulfed the whole property that we just built our house on. So this is something that's very important, near and dear to me. We've performed all the services on my own property, and that's really how I got started in the business.
Cool. Bear Claw Land Services, how long has it been around for? When did you start this?
So I just did a bunch of different tweets about kind of like our first 20 jobs. And I think our first one was August of 2022. So I started building my house in June of 2022. And I actually went and cleared my lot with skid steers and mini excavators. And people kind of came over and saw, the fire mitigation approach that we took on our land and our property. And long story short, sort of a friend of a friend who owned a lot in a neighboring area. I mean, a couple miles away from where I was building my house, said, "Hey, we just got this letter. Our HOA is requiring us to do a certain amount of fire mitigation services, which basically means property cleanup. So anything that's flammable on the property needed to be cleaned up." So a little bit of back history here. In Colorado, the pine beetle came through in the mid 2000s, killed a bunch of trees. Now here we are 10, 15 years later. And throughout that decade and a half period, all these dead trees, they're obviously standing dead. When winds come through, they're easier to blow down. So if you spend any time in the forests of Colorado, anytime outdoors, hiking, fly fishing, mountain biking, and you look in the forest, you will see what we call jackstraw forests, where it's like trees and wood is just piled up on top of each other, sometimes 3, 4, 5 feet tall in certain areas. So that's a little bit of backstory. But on these properties, in these neighborhoods that are approaching the forest, the insurance companies and the HOAs are demanding that there's a certain amount of cleanup work to be done. And so, yeah, that was sort of long story long on the backstory, but the neighbor who approached me about that said, "Hey, we got to get this done. We have a timeline. Our HOA is
Okay.
going to assess a fee if
Wow.
we don't get this done." So he's like, "Hey, I know you used a skid steer on your property to kind of clean it up. Can you go rent the same one and perform the same services on ours?" So I was like, "Yeah." So I called the rental company, rented the skid steer, went over there, charged them several $1,000s. Um, Ended up just agreeing upon like an hourly time and material rate for my rental cost plus my labor time and operator time to operate the equipment, and then any dump fees associated with cleaning up that slash or woody debris and dumping it. So I did that job. And in that time period, I had thrown up a quick Google My Business profile, and I had set it up as a tree service. And that was like the most fitting category that Google allowed me to do. By the time I was done with that job, I was loading up the equipment, and I kid you not, I get a call from a guy from Chicago, and he says, "Hey, I heard I've got a property. We just got a letter from our HOA, so same neighborhood, and we got to do a certain amount of cleanup. You offer tree services, right?" I'm like, "Yes." And in my mind, I'm like, "How the heck does this guy have my number?" Like I had literally, I was in the parking lot of the first job, like pulling the equipment out, and I will never forget this call.
Right.
So I go over there. He flies in from Chicago. I meet him in person. At this point, like he doesn't know that I've only done one job, but I just go over there, quote it as if I'm quoting the next one and I have a full time business, and he hires me to do the work. So then after that, he says, "Well, we're going to build a custom home here, and we need to actually, while you have your equipment here, can you clear our lot for construction?" So that's when it opened up in my mind, like, oh, there is an actual service play here. Like I could get the same equipment and perform fire mitigation services, but also clear land for new construction in the mountains. So that's a little bit of background on the first two jobs. And I think back on that call and I find it funny how it's like sometimes in life, you try and you're in the startup world. Like I've tried to start so many different businesses. Some of them you just bang your head against the wall for a long time.
Right.
And then there's other ones where, um, for me, it's like, I think sometimes it's like God has you in places where you're supposed to be. And this was very apparent that I was in the right scenario and I was doing the right kind of work, because little things like that just kept happening over and over and
Mm-hmm.
over. And it just felt like the ball was already rolling down the hill. And so chalk it up to a number of different things, but I believe there's a big opportunity in local service businesses, especially for millennials and Gen Z right now, to show up, do good work, optimize a digital presence, and then just deliver a great customer service or a great customer experience.
Yeah, and I want to get into the macro picture there because a lot of the folks I'm talking to for the Workbench went through a 4-year degree, definitely were on track to go do a more traditional career, maybe go get a 9 to 5 at a big tech company making 6 figures, finance, tech, healthcare, whatever it may be, and have foregone that path to do something more in the home service, local SMB space. So I definitely want to get into that. In terms of the growth of Bear Claw, so August 2022, you have your first job. It sort of naturally comes to you through a friend. Immediately after that, you have another lead come to you within, it sounds like minutes or hours of standing up your Google presence. From there, what was the scale like? How'd you go from that first job in August 2022 to your first $10,000 in revenue clearing land and doing fire mitigation?
Yeah, it was just a lot of blocking and tackling, like leveraging local networks. I mean, I literally at that point picked up the phone and just started calling all of the builders I either already knew or all of the builders who I knew of at that point. And I just said, "Hey, my name's Austin." I introduced myself. Um, I'm a local entrepreneur. I had started a couple businesses. I'd had a couple local businesses in the past that I had
What were
sold.
those? Do you mind sharing what those
Yeah,
were?
one was a like a local specialty coffee shop
Okay,
and roastery, and then next door we did like shared office space, so a co-working space.
cool.
Yeah, um, and so my partner and I had, before I started building the house, had sold the roastery and the coffee shop, and so like the people who I knew, I just said, "Hey, it's Austin," from the perk. Like some people knew me from that, but then others, didn't. And I just said, "Hey, I'm a local entrepreneur, but I'm starting another business," and kind of gave them a little bit about my background. I grew up working in a concrete company. My dad's a builder. Grew up around the trades. I always knew the next business I wanted to start after the coffee one was to get back into the trades or some sort of local service. And here's what I'm offering. I'm offering tree services. We're doing land clearing, and we're doing a lot of the fire mitigation. So I'm just letting you know that we're here. Here's my number. Here's our website. If you come across any clients in the future, please don't hesitate to funnel them our way. We will take great care of them. You have my word. And also, look, I know you have your excavation guys that you already work with, and they probably clear your lots, right? Yeah, we already do. Okay, that's great. I'm not here to steal any relationships, but if you're ever in a bind and they can't get to you and you got to move the schedule, give us a call, right? So it was like no pressure, no high pressure sales. I'm playing long-term games at this point, and I've learned that if you just put your name out there, like that name is going to spread eventually. So through those calls, one of the guys was like, "Well, um, can you do dirt work with the skid steer?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Dude, there's a huge opportunity right now because none of my excavation contractors will come and do like one-off driveways." So he's like, "I got a driveway for you to do right now if you want to go do it." I'm like, "Yeah, you give me the address, tell me where." Turns out it was like right down the road from me.
Nice.
So I went and did that one. We did a driveway. I moved a bunch of dirt. He's like, "Hey, so for this one, we need a ton of fill dirt and I don't know where to get it. Can you get some?" So I like went around to all the excavation projects, started talking to those guys. "Hey, do you have any extra dirt that I'll pay for trucking?" Right. When in all reality, the builder's paying for the trucking, but
Right.
I'm just telling the excavation contractor. So at that point, I'm just making deals in the local market. Um, so I found some dirt, exported that dirt, hired a subcontractor trucker to export that dirt, pulled it over to our driveway, and then I had my, I guess, third job at that point.
Wow. Okay. Nice. So it sounds like a referral or a friend, and then Google business listing, and then you as the business owner operator doing some cold calling really led to those first couple jobs for Bear Claw. Is that right?
Yes, definitely. And I think this is something that I want to hammer home right now because um, I believe you should totally, like when you're starting a business right now, you should absolutely start with a website and a Google My Business profile. But you cannot rely on that solely at
Right.
all.
Right.
I'm going back through my first 20 jobs, and the first 20 jobs were literally until we landed the federal project. Like most of those were because I was like in the market doing the work. Neighbor came out. "Hey, you have a skid steer? Is this you? You do excavation?" "Yes." Right. It's just like saying yes a lot and then
Right.
figuring it out along the way. "Oh, can you do this retaining wall?" "Yes." Right. We just figured a lot of stuff out. So that's why I'm such a big proponent of and why I've coined this term like the owner operator, because I think
Hmm.
it's so important when starting a local service business. Now, could you be the entrepreneur who goes and launches a Google My Business, gets the leads, farms the leads out? Yeah. But like, you don't earn respect that way. The way you earn respect in the local market is like by getting out there, proving to people that you're willing to bust your butt and earning people's respect. And when you do that, the word just spreads like wildfire. Like, "Hey,
Right.
here's Austin and a couple guys. They showed up on time. They told me they were going to deliver 5-star service. They did. And they asked for a 5-star review and I gave it to them. You should call them." Right. And then
Hmm.
word of mouth starts spreading. And then you got leads coming in from word of mouth. Then some people are searching tree service online. So all the while, all these things are working together. While you're hustling out there in the field, like blocking and tackling, Google is marketing for you as well. So then you'll start picking up a couple calls here and there from the website, which you've already gained so much confidence from actually doing 3 or 4 more jobs just by getting those from in the field. And then you're ready to quote those jobs when they come in
Right.
from your website.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like, yeah, really being in the field, in the market that you're operating in, doing the work, and then using some of these digital tools to work on autopilot while you're actually out servicing these customers. You mentioned that having a website, having a Google My Business listing are key. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of those two things, as well as maybe other digital tools you've used to complement you being out in the field and doing the work?
Absolutely. And this is why I don't want to overlook digital, because we all know there's a ton of baby boomers out there right now who have businesses that have a ton of market share in any given service. And there are so many of these businesses that have that market share that do not even have a website. Like they've
Yeah.
built a business simply off word of mouth.
Mm.
So by simply building a professional website and setting up a Google My Business profile, you are already ahead of your baby boomer competition. Now, whether or not that, here's why I'm a proponent of starting the business, right? Because if you start the business and if you start chipping it away at some market share, whenever your competitors who are ready to retire and sell their business come to that retirement age, if you've already done some business with them, you're going to be first on their list. It's like if you go build a good relationship with your competition who's ready to retire and you tell them that, hey, whenever you're ready to sell the business, give me a call first.
Yeah.
Like they're going to do that because they're going to respect the fact that you're in your 20s or 30s and you're out there busting their butt because
Right.
you are going to remind them specifically of them whenever they were your age.
Right.
They don't want to sell to some private equity dude sitting behind a
Yeah.
computer just trying to play armchair quarterback.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so the thought there is that if you want to start a home service business as land clearing, for example, and maybe you have aspirations to grow it to something bigger than, maybe a handful of customers, and you should be in the market doing the work, building relationships with your competition. So then when you say, hey, I actually want to buy a couple more businesses to expand, you have a lot more credibility compared to some private equity person just has a checkbook. Is that a fair summry?
That's my outlook on it, right?
Okay.
That's my approach. And
Yeah.
I think so many people would disagree with that. I really don't care.
Yeah. And
I think opportunities lie in these markets that are outside these big areas, right?
yeah.
So if you can find an area where there's not a lot of like search or acquisition competition, you can really start to identify what are my future acquisition targets if that's what you want to do to grow your business in the
Yeah.
future. There's so many ways to like bolt on different services and create a bigger company.
Yeah, and so let's talk about expansion of services and growing the company. So it sounds like Bear Claw is in a good place with fire mitigation and land clearing. How are you thinking about potentially expanding the business through new service lines, maybe buying similar companies, hiring new people? How are you thinking about growth for the business over the next year or two?
That's a really good question. Um, and I like how you framed over the next year or two. So right now we pushed really hard the first 18 months. So when I started the business, like I said, we started in August of 2022. I had August, September, and basically October, 3 months worth of operating. We did about 60,000 bucks in revenue total that first year. The next year, and that was basically just solo with like one contract labor guy. Um, the next year, I knew we had to start focusing on building the team. So, some key things going into year two, which I had until May to make that happen, was okay, I was renting this piece of equipment, which was a skid steer for so many jobs in those first 3 months. I made the strategic decision to go ahead and purchase a skid steer on a financed agreement. So and lined up the purchase so that it was ready to go in May of 2023.
What's
What
the
I
cost of a new skid steer, roughly?
This one's a forestry package, so it's about 120 grand. For the forestry package, they do like a bunch of like reinforced glass. They cover up the engine bay. There's like a decent amount of risk associated with this work, and so
Yeah.
you don't want to be operating with just like a normal skid steer with glass. Like
Yeah.
I probably would have died a couple times already
Yeah.
with trees coming
Yeah.
through the window.
And the reason I ask is I think that's it's a big investment for a lot of people and for a lot of business owners. So it's interesting to hear that, and I want to let you keep going, but it's interesting to hear you had the confidence to go make that investment in the business at this early point.
Well, I think it just comes down to like, this whole game of entrepreneurship
Yeah.
is at the end of the day, you got to bet on yourself. And I was very confident that no matter what, I know for a fact, like I had a hunch that I could build a business off the fire mitigation, but I had a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, a plan E, a plan all the way down. Right. And what I mean by that is like there are so many different services that you can offer with the skid steer. And if push came to shove, and I remember telling my wife this, it's like the worst case scenario is I literally call other excavation subcontractors and I say, hey, I'm a solo guy. I just have a skid steer. Sub me out whenever you need me.
Right.
Everybody's looking for good help, right? If you can operate well, like there will always be work out there. But I knew that was like worst case scenario. So we stuck with the plan. We kept blocking and tackling. I knew in order to do this, I had to hire somebody for general field labor. I had to hire an office manager. because I knew I couldn't be handling all the admin stuff. I knew that I had to uh, have somebody managing my website and SEO. And I knew that somebody needed to be managing my social. So, as an owner operator, I believe it's very important. Like, my style is working in the business. I'm all about working in the business in the early days, but that doesn't mean doing everything in the business. So I wrote out a list of like, what can I do? What can I bring to the business? And what should I do? And ultimately, what it came down to is I need to be outsourcing everything else or hiring and delegating everything other than selling, estimating, and leading the field crew. Those were the three main things that I focused on in that 2023 year. And by focusing on doing our estimating and sales, that allowed me to meet with all of our customers, understand the real root of the problem here. This is a very popular thing in the startup world in tech. Everybody always talks about talk to your customers, talk to your customers, like do things that don't scale early on. And it's no different in this industry. So like I identified that the best use of my time, and it still is going into 2024, a really great use of my time is still doing our sales and estimating, because I want to continue talking to our customers and I want to continue testing our pricing strategy, right? And I want to understand what the market is going to be able to afford from a price perspective.
Right.
So through that in 2023, focusing on leading the field operations, I was able to hire an office manager. My first hire in the field was a general labor guy. That allowed me to continue like driving the projects, but also like operating the equipment, which is a fairly risky job.
Yep. And
through being in the field, I met our lead operator. So about halfway through, I started bringing him in as a subcontractor. And by the time we were on a field, by the time we landed the federal project in September, I just brought him in as a Bear Claw team member.
Understood. Yeah, and I want to talk about the federal project. I saw that on the website. That sounds like a big win that we should dig into. Question here on building the team. So I think a lot of folks starting out with a home service business, from what I've seen and talking to people, they'll start with them, maybe one partner, and there's a decent chance they've not hired and managed folks in a professional setting before. So when you go out and say, all right, I need to hire these people, and these are very different people. The person you're hiring for the field labor is a much different person than the office manager, website SEO, social media, etc. What's been your approach to finding the right people and hiring them to build out the team at Bear Claw?
So to find an office manager, I would recommend going to every single coffee shop in your area and talking to the baristas. Hey, my name's Austin. I got a small business here. Here's my card. I'm hiring for a part-time role, 4 hours a day, 20 hours a week. Pretty simple blocking and tackling, just administrative tasks. I'm looking to grow my business, but for the right person, there are growth opportunities. It's pretty simple. You cannot control what people are going to respond with, but what you can control, and this is a big thing that I sort of harp on all the time, is like in any phase of business, one should focus on what can be controlled and let the outcome take care of itself. So by visiting all those coffee shops at different times of the day, because you got to realize most coffee shops operate with a morning shift and an afternoon shift. So usually there's two different baristas. If you just go hand out your business card and say, hey, let me know if you know any of your friends or know anybody who's looking for work, and just tell them about the opportunity, right? This type of stuff can be easily trained. People who are great for this are young people who have moved to the area who are just trying to get their feet on the ground. Like stay-at-home moms, like that was another recommendation from another entrepreneur who's like, hey, I've hired plenty of stay-at-home moms who just want like something to do with their day, essentially. So like giving them a part-time, like 4 hours a day is like exactly what they want because they still want to be um, like involved with their kids a lot. Um, but yeah, that worked out well. And then now we've created multiple positions in like different roles for that person. She's still with us today, and she's an absolute rock star. Secondly, for finding general labor, like some ways that I did this in the beginning was I just went to all the local hardware stores. And every time I was in the hardware store, if somebody asked me if I needed help, I would say, and I remember specifically remember this, yes, I need help. Also, if you have any friends or if you know of anybody I'm hiring for some outdoor like landscaping style work, here's my card, give me a call or have them give me a call. That's how I found our first guy. Hardware stores, also just like restaurants or like farm and ranch stores, go hang flyers there. It's so rudimentary, right? And it's so boring, but this stuff works.
And I've noticed that you put an emphasis on in real life, physical world presentation of offers and uh, talking to people at the coffee shop, at the hardware store, hanging flyers in a digital world. I bet that's a good way to stand out because I think less people are probably indexing towards those more, IRL, you could say, situations.
Yeah, and it's so easy to just get caught up in the mindset, especially if you've been involved with tech or
Yeah.
e-commerce. It's like, dude, where are the people who exist who like actually want to do like outdoor landscape and style work,
Yeah.
right? They're everywhere though. Like there are still plenty of people. Um, so yeah, that's how I found those people.
And then website SEO, social media, are those folks you hire for? Do you use an agency? How'd you approach that piece? Because I know that's big for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, and here's one thing. So like I used to build websites as one of my side businesses,
Cool.
and I think most of us in today's age could go figure out how to build a website. But what I realized is when I was building the websites for my past businesses, I was also taxed with updating those as well. And I found that it was something I enjoyed, but it was a huge time suck because I'm kind of a design control freak. And if something would just get messed up, like I could spend hours just trying to tweak it. When in all reality, like that does not matter at all. So I identified that that was one of my weaknesses on where I could waste time in this business. And so I just hired it out to an agency, like paid a pro to build it. This was specifically for Bear Claw. And then on top of that, they managed my Google My Business profile and they started doing some of my SEO in the beginning. And they set up all the like header and meta tags or whatever, meta description, everything correctly instead of me like missing that as this like solo entrepreneur. So that was like with this business, I really wanted to challenge myself, delegate the things that I don't feel like is a great use of my time.
Right.
So website was number one. Social media was number two. Like the biggest time suck is social media. So I wanted to say, like, how do I build a social media presence, right? Because if you don't have a social media presence in today's age, people are like, are you even, like people question, are you even a company, right? I can't find you on Facebook or can't find you on Instagram. So I knew I had to go find somebody. And yeah, ended up hiring all that out. They now manage all of our Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and they do all of our YouTube editing and publishing. And that's been a really fun project to work on, like document a lot of our projects in the field and then have somebody editing on the back end.
For someone getting started, how important do you think social media is? It sounds like a website and Google My Business is table stakes if you want to stand up a home service business. Is social media a must have in that early stage and nice to have? How do you think about that?
If you have capital to invest, like I believe it's worth the $1,500 a month or whatever it is, um, to have somebody just managing all that and start building that presence. Um, but if you don't, just go create a quick Facebook page and a quick Instagram page, set up your handles, do like Just take pictures of your first couple jobs and then just throw the pictures up. I still don't believe it's a great use of your time as an owner to be doing that. So I recommend delegating that as soon as you possibly can with out of cash flows. But if you had to invest in only one or the other, it would be website and Google My Business all day long.
Cool. And then last piece here on the like ton of technology software. What are the other key systems you use to manage your business, whether it's a CRM, emailing? Yeah, what are those core pieces of software that power Bear Claw?
Yeah, our stack is very simple. It's Jobber, it's email. We've implemented Notion to start documenting our SOPs at this point, and we use Zapier for pretty much everything. Slack for internal communication, and that's it.
Simple enough. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this federal project. It sounds like you landed two big projects in the Rocky Mountain National Park. I think for people who are just getting started, maybe doing one or two small jobs, the idea of closing this big win seems so far out. So I think it would be cool to hear the story of the federal projects and how those turned out for the business.
Yes, and this is why I would recommend investing in a website with a pro as soon as you possibly can. So, the way that we got this job, I get a call one day at roughly 11 a.m. our time. The guy tells me that they have a project, doesn't even call it Rocky Mountain National Park. Asks me if we can do land clearing on 20 acres. At that point, it was going to be our biggest job, but I said yes. Asked me that immediately over the phone. And then he asked me, okay, great. Can you meet me for lunch tomorrow in Grand Lake? We got a little project in the park, is what he told me. That's exactly how he worded it. He's a 72-year-old former logger. He was a superintendent for Kiewit, big construction company, but he's done pretty much everything in like logging and civil construction. I'll never forget that. We got a project in the park. And in my head, like I literally thought that whenever he first said, meet me in Grand Lake, we got a project in the park, I thought he was talking about like the little city park right there
Right,
in town.
right.
But then after we got done with the call, I'm like, this dude's talking about Rocky Mountain National Park. So anyway, I go and meet this guy um, in person. I do the site walk with him. He asks me if we can handle it. I tell him no problem at all. And he says, okay, we'll be in touch. Later to come, we end up getting the job, right? Um, I later come to find out, and I asked him after we performed the work on the job, how did you find us? He said, well, Austin, and this is a 72-year-old, remember. He says, when I flew into Denver, I pulled up my phone, I typed in land clearing and excavation Winter Park, and guess who showed up first? Bear Claw Land Services
There you go.
on Google Maps, and we were first in search. So he called us plus the next two guys in line. I answered my phone immediately. I showed up to lunch when he asked me to. I met him in person. I shook his hand, and he didn't even consider either of the other guys.
Wow.
So there was a lesson to be learned there. And I'm speaking just as much to myself as I am to everyone else listening. When you get a website lead, that lead could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars at any point
Right.
if you were optimizing well. So my point is there, and the lesson I've taken away from this is when I get a call from an unknown number, I'm answering as fast as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And that has proven to work well. If you answer your phone and if you meet people within 24 to 48 hours after they respond either to your Google My Business, to your website, or to Facebook ads, if you're doing those Instagram ads, the quicker you can respond, the higher your close rate is going to be.
Yeah. So many nuggets there in that win. And the big ones for me are, yeah, calling that immediately when you got that lead, you called them right away. willing to go meet the buyer in person. In terms of ranking first for that search, I think that's a huge piece of leverage there. Up to that point, had you done anything particularly specific or sophisticated to make sure you were that first result? And if so, what was that?
Yes, I say I outsourced all my website and my SEO.
Right.
I still really enjoy being involved with strategy.
Okay.
So I prioritized that from a very early stage.
Hmm.
Like from the day we started the business, I hired the website agency and then I made sure we had an SEO consultant on track. And I just had calls with him for like the first 3 months. Dude, I know that there's not a ton of search traffic for fire mitigation, but let's stick with it. Like it
Hmm.
is an opportunity that if we can get ahead of. And so we started tweaking our strategy as we went. We realized that like, the search volume is for land clearing. So we started tailored our SEO strategy there. And then we just started creating content. And something that's huge for local service. If you post pictures on your Google My Business profile consistently with descriptions and the service and keywords for like your search terms, uh, like Google's going to prioritize you. And it's a very simple thing to do. So going back to our question earlier, should you have a social media or Google My Business? Like if you could only pick one, just post all your pictures to Google My Business.
And to be
Um,
clear, that you as the owner operator are on site doing the job, taking pictures and then uploading them to the Google My Business, right?
yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. And it doesn't have to be you. Like if you can delegate this to your team, that's great. I absolutely love the film capture. Like we do YouTube. I love documenting our process. I like engaging our team. I like showcasing our equipment. And somebody who does this really well. If you guys don't already watch him or follow him on YouTube, his name is Garrett Williams. I interviewed him on the Owner Operator podcast. The dude he's awesome. Um, Great positive mindset. He's a great dude. He's built a great team. He's 23. They're doing about $5 million a year
Wow.
in excavation, landscaping, but he has a great YouTube channel, really informative. Um, and I just sort of picked up a lot of stuff from him. So like when I'm in the field, I'm doing a lot of YouTube stuff. I'm taking a lot of photos. I'm uploading that to our shared iCloud. Then our agency on the back end is like pumping that out across social. We're also uploading it to Google My Business. Here's one thing I did learn from our SEO agency though recently. Location matters on Google My Business. If I take a photo here, so where all this came up is like we are launching a new service area for our land clearing services down in the Denver area. We're about 65 miles away. If I were to post a photo that I took from a project here and say land clearing services like Denver, Google would recognize that you're trying to hack the system. So don't
Wow.
do that.
Okay.
Take your photos, like wait till you get an actual job in that service area and then go take the photo there. And Google is going to read the description from the iPhone. What do they call it? Like the location like geotagging or something.
Yeah.
It's going to read that data and then it's going to tell the algorithm that like this photo is legit
Mm,
for this service in this specific area.
right.
And if you do that, then you're going to be prioritized over your customers who are using like stock photos or just like trying to hack together new service
Yeah.
locations.
Love that. It's a great insight. Now, for this expansion piece, will this be Bear Claw? Do you plan to spin it off as a separate brand? So for people that want to expand, what's the approach there and how do you plan about going about doing that?
I've thought a lot about that, but ultimately, what it came down to me, like the decision that I made with our SEO agency, is to drive everything back to the Bear Claw brand. So we will just have different service locations on one website. And the reason is because we're already doing stuff on YouTube. We've got, several thousand people on Instagram who are following, they're engaging with our photos and videos. Our YouTube shorts are getting a ton of engagement at this point. It seems like a lot of extra work to go launch another brand. And so we're just going to optimize new service areas underneath the Bear Claw brand and replicate that throughout the state of Colorado eventually.
Makes sense. Cool. And on the plan of expansion, would love to hear about the future plans for Bear Claw if you span out and any other kind of business you're working on. If you span out over the next 5 year period, what's the plan and how do you want to scale the business?
It's a great question. And I was at this retreat, the Uncommon Elite retreat this weekend with Christian Ruff. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but great dude, incredible leader. Was part of the 160th Division Night Stalkers, like dudes who fly the helicopters, who take all the Navy SEALs and the Delta Force around and drop them off in the middle of the night, like in between buildings and things like that.
Wow.
Um, so incredibly dialed on just like setting a goal and then like being like laser focused with that. Um, I got this question a lot. Like, are you looking to expand Bear Claw? And like the answer is obviously yes. Like we're always looking to grow. That's what's fun. That's what's challenging. But what I think a lot of modern like pop entrepreneurship culture is teaching is like scale, 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 scale or die, scale at all costs. And in all reality, if you just think about this for a second, look around the next time, drive around your town, find, look at the next billboard. Like we were in Asheville and I saw a billboard for a tree service business. I saw billboards for power washing business. We saw like apple farms. The owners of those businesses with like one location, they're probably living a great life. They likely own all their equipment. They likely own all their real estate, which is worth several $100,000 to $1 million, maybe more. And then their business is kicking off. Like if they've been in the business for 20, 30 years and they've built a decent business, it's kicking off 3, 4, 500K a year, right? Those people are living a great life. And if you can't live a great life making $250,000 or $500,000 a year, and if it's always just about like making the money, like I think something I'm challenging myself to do even, and even like the listeners here is like figure out a way to be happy when you net profit 100K in your business, and when you net profit $250,000 in your business, and when you net profit 300 and then 400, right? And be okay with the small incremental growth. Because man, you know, like the one thing I would say is if you can't be happy at 100, 200, 300 and 400 and 500, I don't think 5 million bucks is going to make you happy. You may have another
Mm,
house in a beach location,
hmm.
and you may have a, you know, the car that you want to drive, but at a certain point that's going to wear off. Um, And so a big thing I'm working on right now is like, dude, we live in the place. Like we've worked really hard to live in the mountains of Colorado. I'm happy living here. Um, I don't necessarily care to drive back down to the city. So we're doing work like outside our service area in the wintertime while there's snow here. But dude, to block and tackle in our own local market, I love working with our team. Um, like that's my goal for this year
Right.
is to refine our processes and just build better camaraderie with our team. And then I just want everything that we do to be centered around delivering 5-star service. And if we can do that and have the SOPs to support that, then we can start thinking about really replicating this thing. So, like, that's obviously exciting down the line. I just don't think we're there yet. And
Mhm.
we need to just continue showing up day in, day out, work on our teamwork, and just work on delivering a great product.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really great way to think about it. And I come from working mostly at venture-backed startups, and so it's growth at all costs. And if you're not at $5 or $10 million or $50 million in revenue, are you even really do you really even have a business? And then comparing that to what I'm learning about in this industry, it's a much different philosophy and one that I think is a lot healthier, especially as a when you own the business yourself, opposed to having all these outside investors. Um, so yeah, to wrap up here, if I'm a new home service owner operator or I'm thinking about starting a home or local service business, what's one piece of advice you would share with me?
Don't be afraid to get out there and do the work. Like, our culture has completely gotten away from like encouraging the humility of actually being the one to deliver the service. everybody wants to memorize this whole like sit in a desk behind a computer and then like click a couple buttons and tell people what to do and automate everything and go travel the world and live this life as a digital nomad. And it's like, I think maybe some people can be happy there, but it's also fun to set roots in a local community and to deliver a great product and a great service to your community and become known as someone who delivers a great service in your community. Like that feels good whenever you have customers who will literally come up to you at the gym and say, "Hey, thank you so much for what you did. I'm going to refer you to my neighbor because they need a driveway this next
Right.
year."
Right.
That feels good. And that doesn't scale. It simply doesn't, but that's okay. It really is. And I think the whole thing I'm trying to push with the owner operator podcast is it's fine. And I even think it's cool to go build a small local service business, operate in one singular market and do that really, really, really well and just see where that leads you.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's such an interesting space with to your earlier comment about Gen Z and millennials focusing on this industry. I think a lot of quote unquote white collar work is at risk right now due to AI and just the advances in technology and software is going to become easier and easier to create. But I think we're still a ways from technology upending some of these local businesses that are, very require you to be boots on the ground there doing the work. So it's an interesting trend. And is that something you've seen? You'd mentioned kind of those demographic shifts there. Have you seen that demographic focusing more on these local home service businesses that you mentioned?
Funny story about this. When I was building my house, we just finished up last September, but um, when we were in the electrical phase, there was a girl in her late 20s who showed up at my house with my electrician. And I thought this might be this guy's girlfriend. And so I introduced myself and how are you? If you need anything to drink, let us know. We have water over here, all this stuff. And I thought like maybe she just came to hang out for the day. And I like go to another room, then I come back in and she's like wiring up an outlet. So I'm like, wait, like you're working with Eddie? And she's like, yeah, like I was working remotely in tech and then I got laid off and I moved to Summit County, which is like another neighboring county where like Vale and Silverthorne and all that stuff is. And she's like, yeah, so she moved to this other area in our area,
Right.
called this electrician, was like, hey, I want to get back in the trades. My dad was in construction and I just think it's like a really stable career. So I want to learn how to be an electrician. And that was when I was like, holy crap, this is awesome.
Super cool.
Like we have hope for people my age, people in their 20s.
Yeah.
And I just think it's cool that there is still opportunity to get back out in the field and do some of the dirty work, even though tech is kind of up in the air right now and finance is up in the air.
Yeah. Great, man. Well, appreciate you coming on. Where can folks find you on the web, the website for the business, your Twitter? Let us know where you're at on the digital spaces.
Yeah, I choose to be active on Twitter. That's like where I spend my time if I am on social media. I guess we have to start calling it X now if we don't want to get dinged by the algorithm. But yeah, I'm at the owner op, kind of short for the owner operator. We also have a podcast, the owner operator podcast. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple. I'm also working on a project called ownerops.com. And we're just creating resources. Like my team and I have just been documenting what we've been doing to build a service business from the ground up. And we're documenting all those resources. We're creating a bunch of video content, creating a bunch of blog articles. We have a private Slack community for service business owners. And that is all held at ownerops.com. That's OWNROPS.com. But yeah, the best place to reach me is on Twitter, just at the owner op. Reach out there. And I love connecting with other service entrepreneurs.
Great. Yeah, and we'll put links to all the websites you mentioned there in the communities and appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. You're a great interviewer.
Thank you.
Yep.